Welcome to the Global South Conversations. My name is Ismail Akwei, and we are here with Professor Jeffrey Sachs. He is a global economist and someone who knows so much about economics. Welcome, Professor Jeffrey Sachs.
Ismail, great to be with you. Thank you very much.
You've long championed global cooperation and ethical economics with the current shift in geopolitics and the US shaking the old order with tariffs and sanctions. What is the way out for global South countries? Because everybody is complaining at the moment.
Yes, what's happening in the world is that we are in a shift of global politics. For 500 years, basically the West, meaning Europe and the United States, were in charge. And they were in charge through imperialism. They were in charge of world finance. They were in charge of the world economy. And that was true pretty much from 1500 onward. Of course, the specific dates depend on which region of the world. Africa was uh, subject to this system very early on with the slave trade. But colonization came later because malaria had been a barrier, actually, to the arrival of the European imperialists until the towards the end of the 19th century. Finally, this Western system is ending. And I say finally because it was not a fair system. It was not a just system. It was not an ethical system. It was a system of power. And it is changing because power is now more diffuse, more shared, more different parts of the world than has been true for centuries. China, of course, is now a major power. India is becoming a major power. I want the African Union as a union to become a major global power. This is all possible. Technology is spreading. Economic development is spreading. The world is online everywhere, even in remote villages, though not equally yet. But I think that we're in an age which I call the age of convergence, where the poorer countries, the ones that were colonized in the past, are going to have much larger voices and much larger say in the future.
Well, you're saying with the shift, you're looking forward to Africa and the others also becoming global powers. However, we are seeing some African countries succumbing to some of the sanctions that the US is placing on them, and there's not a single voice. Are you saying without the African Union, uh, Africa cannot really make it out of this imperialism, if we want to use that word?
Think that unity is absolutely essential. And I'll give just the basic numbers. Uh, Africa has 1.4 billion people. China has 1.4 billion people. India has 1.4 billion people. But just by fate, Africa is 55 countries because that's how the imperialists divided up the continent. India remained one country because one imperialist dominated. That was Britain. And China was only partially colonized. It never was really fully colonized, so it remained an integral country. I want Africa to speak with the voice of 1.4 billion people. In fact, Africa is going to have a larger population than India and China. Uh, by mid-century, a significantly larger population. Africa needs to have its voice heard at that scale. But 55 countries allows for the United States or others to divide and conquer. As long as Africa is divided, it doesn't have the geopolitical weight. In recent years, I championed the admission of the African Union as the 21st member of the G20. And this has now happened. I want the African Union to use this seat effectively, saying we're there at the front table. Our voice is absolutely going to be heard on financial policy, trade policy, technology policy. And I want the United States and others not to be able to impose sanctions on Africa because they're illegal, those sanctions. Only the UN has the legal right to impose sanctions. So I want the African Union to represent the continent to say, we're big, we're important, we produce a lot of the vital resources needed for the world economy. We are gaining in technological excellence. We're here to stay and we're demanding our voice.
That's some great words, and I'm sure a lot of Africans will be happy about that. However, deep down, we are seeing a different kind of reality on the ground where the people are still poor. But if you look at the numbers are looking good. Some countries are making the shift, but it's a very slow shift. But how does it come down to the people? So these are some of the questions that a lot of people are asking. What are we doing wrong as Africans?
Africa needs a high growth strategy now. I worked on a report with the African Development Bank with the chief economist, Kevin Urama, and an excellent team, which shows that Africa can achieve growth of 7 or 8 or even higher percentage points per year for the next 40 years. That's a high growth strategy based on a high investment strategy. And I want the African Union, especially the new African Union Commission, to get on with a major commitment throughout Africa of this high growth strategy. That means a lot more investments. It does mean a lot more uh, market capital coming in, but on good terms that make sense. It means partnerships with China. It means partnerships with India. It means not relying only on the old uh, uh, so-called partners who were also the imperialists generally. It means Africa having a truly multilateral, multipolar strategy in the world. But at the core is rapid economic growth. And rapid economic growth depends on high investment in 3 areas. First, in schooling. This is absolutely key. In Ghana, uh, uh, President
Mahama.
Akufo-Addo
Oh,
initiated free education through upper secondary. This was a very important policy. We need to get every African child throughout the continent in school, at least completing secondary, and a lot going on to tertiary. This is feasible. Second big investment is infrastructure, rail, roads, fiber for digital, uh, renewable energy technologies. All of this needs to be built out massively. This also can be done. By the way, China is a good partner in that because they're very good at building infrastructure and at financing it. And this is a part of, I think, a good strategy. The third is business development, of course. Africa has a new generation of entrepreneurs, young startups, young college grads that are making new technology businesses. This is wonderful. And this is also going to be the basis of rapid economic growth in the years ahead. So high investment, high growth, get out of the current trap. Now, the IMF does not give the right advice on this. The IMF advice is don't borrow, don't invest so much, don't overdo it, stay out of trouble. But that just prolongs poverty. We need a bolder strategy. And that's what I want the African Union, the African Development Bank, the Afrexim Bank, and other financial institutions and international partners to help achieve.
that's great. And the US currently, with the shift that they're going, um, some Americans believe, well, the Republicans, led by Donald Trump right now, are focusing on Americans and they are winning. Does it look like America is winning currently with the direction that Donald Trump is taking the country?
You know, if you have to protect the economy, you're not winning. You're in defense. Uh, the US is afraid of China because China is so productive. low cost, hyper competitive. The US even invented a word, overcapacity. It says China has overcapacity. That just means America has undercapacity. That's all it
Mm,
means. Uh, because the world needs what China can produce, and it wants it. So the protectionism is a defensive reaction. It's not a proof of winning. Of course, Trump is a good showman. He's filled with bluster. He says, I'm a winner, we're a winner. But what does it really mean when you have to win by imposing barriers against China?
mm, that's true. That's true. And with this winning mentality and everything, with all the propaganda going around, uh, are Americans really losing out? Or this is giving some other countries that were dependent on the US the ability or the opportunity to be independent? Because some think as such, while others think it's destroying a lot of things, especially with the USAID cancellation and all of that. So is it also an opportunity for other countries to grow themselves and be better?
I think so. I think that we're moving to a world in which the US plays a much more limited role, and other regions and other countries play a much greater role. For Africa, China will be important. India will be important. The Gulf region will be important. They'll all be investing heavily in Africa. That's good. That's new partners, new cash, new businesses. And I think that this is what happens when the US is actually in a kind of retreat.
Hmm. And should developing countries be afraid of Russia, as the word is going around that Russia has an interest, Russia wants to annex the US if US severs ties with or economic ties with other countries that are developing. Should the rest of the world be afraid of Russia, or it's just one of such propaganda that we've been seeing?
It's propaganda. The US competes with other big powers, and so it says nasty things about the other powers. But frankly, uh, all of the bad talk, the bad mouthing of China, of Russia, of others, to my mind, doesn't add up.
Hmm.
Uh, I would look for business partners, investment partners anywhere.
Hmm. Well, in the next 5 years, which countries do you see to be making some gains when it comes to economic development around the world?
Well, right now, China will continue to grow well. India will continue to have rapid growth. Southeast Asia, the ASEAN countries, countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam will have good growth. I want Africa to be on that list. And the way for Africa to be on that list is through a continental wide strategy. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area and a bigger role for the African Development Bank. The African Development Bank's a big key institution for financing infrastructure, for getting things going, but it's too small. It needs to be expanded 10 times compared to what it is right now. It's only lending about 5 to 10 billion a year. It should be lending 50 to $100 billion a year. And so, one of the ways to get this new investment is a much larger role for the African Development Bank in the years ahead.
Hmm. And then finally, what message would you like to share with young leaders and economists from the global south, especially who are inspired by your work?
This is the time in which a new, fair, multipolar world is being built, in which the voices in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, in which the economies of those regions are coming to the forefront. The West, it led, and it was often very cruel in its so-called leadership. We're going to have a fairer world in the years ahead, but there's lots of work to do. Uh, we need skills, we need innovation, we need investments, we need good strategies. So that's for the young people. This is your time.
Thank you very much, Professor Jeffrey Sachs. It's great talking to you.